Hello and welcome. The goal of this podcast is to get listeners connected with others in the sports industry because they say it's all about who you know, and now you know us. Well, hello and welcome, listeners and viewers, to another episode of the Constant Sports Podcast. We have a big time mover and shaker in the sports industry today. We have Alexander Turner. Thanks for joining us today, Alexander.
Hey, thank you for having me on, Connor. It's been a
Yeah,
pleasure.
of course, looking forward to it. Alexander is the Senior Partnerships Director at Apex Athlete Management, where they maximize NIL potential for athletes and those in the space, including kind of NIL strategies, maximizing kind of the athlete's overall package and whatnot, and a few other things we'll dive into. So, really, Alexander, let's kind of maybe just give us a quick, elevator pitch, kind of what you're up to these days and what keeps you busy.
Yeah, so obviously I am the Senior Partnerships Director and founder of Apex Athlete Management, a sports marketing agency for collegiate and professional athletes. I'm also the CMO of my family business called Fairpreneurs, so I handle all of the marketing, content marketing, and marketing operations there. Um, and that is pretty much most of what I do, but it takes up obviously a lot of the time, so I very much enjoy it.
Yeah, for sure. We'll dive into those as well. But yeah, appreciate that. And then we'll just kind of start with Apex and kind of go from there a little bit. But as you're building out this company, what are some ways Apex, differentiates itself in I guess you could say the ever growing NIL landscape of companies and things coming into the space.
Yeah, most definitely. Obviously, there's a lot of different ways that people look at NIL. Most ways, obviously, the brand partnerships endorsement side. But one of the things we really like to focus on is making sure that we're helping the athletes build something as far as longevity, both in the community and, in whatever their lives are, right? So we kind of give them like the business development support, having them understand, for one, whether they like it or not, they're kind of a business now,
Yeah.
right? So how to operate in that, right, and then using whether that's the partnerships and connections you're able to make, using the money that you're able to acquire, having that kind of go into the next stages of your life and kind of building that now rather than later, right?
Mhm.
All the agencies are obviously doing the NIL endorsement side, like the brand building. We obviously do the media relations as well, but we try to make sure we're taking all of those tools and actually crafting them a plan that is going to take them to whatever their post-career playing life is actually going to be, because obviously they're not going to be playing for, their entire lives. So
Yeah.
kind of setting themselves up for later.
Awesome. And then that kind of touches into one of the next questions I want to chat about, but that's the kind of the empowering college athletes and high school athletes at that as well with the education and strategy support. So maybe just on the education side, what are some, I guess, talking points or things? Obviously, no trade secrets or anything, but for your company, but what are kind of some things that, athletes should, be on the lookout for or kind of why they come to you?
Yeah, most definitely. I feel like the initial one is IP, right?
Mhm.
Understanding like their own intellectual property, how that is valuable, right? The whole purpose of NIL as a whole is to monetize off of your name, image, and likeness. And obviously, to really monetize off of that, you need to understand that you have to have certain IP ownerships in place and understanding where you don't and how to operate within that. I would also feel like probably the next thing, like I said, is understanding the foundations of building their business, right? Because it's not always about, you always hear people talking about you need to scale to get here, you need to do this to grow, but like not a lot of times athletes understand the basics of how to properly lay the foundation and
Yeah.
having like a lot of those things done properly in the beginning. Because like in order to grow, really not every business is going to be the same. It's not going to grow the same, right? So you have to set it up properly, right? And having them understand what's best for what their long-term goals are and how to just do some of those initial things at the beginning.
Mhm. Yeah, and kind of a little bit like what you said, kind of building that foundation, the base, I think is, not to skip over. I feel like athletes just say like, oh, here, let me just grow my whatever it is, social media or
Yeah.
following, go do this and that. And then, they might get down the road and it's not too late, but kind of having that foundation is much more important, early on than it is, later on and doing that. But what are some, I mean, that could be a challenge that athletes are facing, but as far as, the legal, the branding, the taxation complexities within NIL, and
Hmm.
we've seen a few different clearinghouse things go through, with Congress and whatnot. But what are some on that side of things with the complexities of NIL? Where do you kind of see that? It's kind of a loaded question, but where do you kind of see that going forward, as far as kind of the legal side of it, I guess in 2025?
Um, it honestly could go a few different ways, so I'll kind of give a couple different thoughts that I feel like
Yeah.
it could go. One, I feel like the biggest hurdle that would dictate how it kind of goes is they recently made it clear that obviously Title IX plays a large factor into
Yeah.
the payments that are going to be to athletes, right? And initially they were saying, okay, before that was explicitly made clear recently, right? They were saying that certain athletes or single athletes are going to be able to get like $1 million from a school directly of that
Mhm.
20%. And let's just say if the school is only able to give 20 million and one athlete is getting 1 million from that, right? That's a big disparity from the rest of the athletes, right? So
Mhm.
possibly seeing a max put on, the single amount a player could get from a school, which that can obviously defer school to school, right?
Right.
So maybe it turns into like, I know I'm going to get more money at this school rather than this school because of a specific cap or percentage cap. So it might give an unfair advantage to certain schools, things like that. I feel like another way, and that can obviously affect NIL in the sense that
Mhm.
now if you're always having the top athletes go to big schools for the big money, right? It's then going to cheapen the sport in other schools unless there is an influx of money from outside sources is not going to really have the opportunity to grow to a real powerhouse like other schools, right? Which basically means more and more money keeps getting poured into the same schools. And then you end up having super schools and things
Right.
like
Super
that, right? So like that
conferences. Yeah.
exactly. So the other thing being if it's, and that's like if it's not maxed, right? If
Mhm.
you're allowed to basically just have athletes get paid whatever, but if you're able to limit it properly and then have it be more even to the sports and to both the women athletes and men athletes in the smaller sports, right? Whether that's like gymnastics at some school isn't as big as it big at Florida,
Yeah.
right? So like having all the athletes and all at each school really get a fair share. I feel like that could also shape a better way of better competitiveness, athletes not always leaving and hopping school to school that you see always in the transfer portal, because maybe they're like, okay, I know I'm going to be getting paid this amount from this school. Uh, and instead of me thinking I'm going to get more money somewhere else and I'm pretty much going to get the same, I can actually choose to be at a school for not only its sports program, but maybe the institution that is as well, right?
Yeah.
So now that could possibly culture and cultivate, not saying obviously athletes don't take care and are, important or emphasizing their studies, which I know a lot of them
Education. Yeah.
are, but maybe it could obviously grow that in a larger way. And athletes are able to use those things, use their majors, use their hobbies, and actually still grow that into a part of what their NIL can be, kind of expanding, like I said, that business side and the other opportunities that could possibly open up in the community.
Yeah, no, well said. And I think it'll be interesting to see where, I guess, the industry goes. NIL is a relatively, kind of still in its infancy. If you think about it, it's only a few,
Hmm.
4 or 5 years old. And so I think there's still a lot to happen, a lot that can happen, and especially with these conferences. And, we may almost have kind of three, four-ish mega conferences at this point with,
Exactly.
Pac-12, old Pac-12 schools now in the Big Ten and things like that. And so, more change is coming, I'm sure of it, especially this year with a few things going into effect. And I guess kind of sticking back with the Apex side of things and athletes, is that do they kind of ask? Are they curious about kind of what's going on, like, or are they just kind of focus on what's in front of them?
Um, I know that my athletes pay attention to it,
Hmm.
but I don't get a lot of questions based on how it'll affect them.
Yeah,
Just because I do my best to, if there is something that's majorly going to affect them, me letting them know before they have to let
right.
me know,
Yeah.
right? But they don't seem obviously too, overly like what's going to happen as of right now, because I feel like
Hmm.
it's really just still ultimately going to work in their favor.
Yeah.
So I feel like they're just kind of waiting to see uh what could happen. But I will kind of add this side note saying that athletes.org is kind of doing a very good job of
Hmm.
including a lot of the athletes' voices in these things. And I feel like that's really where I'm hearing more of like the productive talks and a lot of movement and them being able to kind of, make sure that whatever happens is in the athlete's best favor.
Right. Yeah, that was a great segue, great plug because I was going to mention regarding the athletes, I feel like in some of the NIL discussions, it's everyone that's discussing these things are the actual athletes. There's no like players union. I'm saying they need to unionize.
Hmm.
There's no really, big voice, big a way for the athletes to say, hey, we would like, X, Y, or Z, or we want this or that. So I think, yeah, you're right. And I think they just held some sort of conference or something recently.
Yeah, they
Uh,
had one here in Atlanta this past
okay.
weekend.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so that's yeah, it's great. And I think, continuing and fostering those, conversations and I guess meetings and conferences is only going to help the cause. So more power to them. And regarding kind of the collaborations between athletes and businesses for, mutual success for both parties, what are some, you know,
Mhm.
maybe not top kind of collabs or fun kind of collaborations you've done with athletes and businesses since your time with founding Apex?
I would honestly say the one that I was most proud of just because of the creative thought and aspect of it was probably the camp that I recently had for one of my athletes. Her
Mhm.
name was Jayla Wright, uh, former Duke ACC Pitcher of the Year. She now plays for like the professional Texas Smoke team.
Okay, yeah.
I was able to kind of help put a clinic together with someone who actually reached out to me, Big Boss Performance, and they were kind of able to help put the entire venue together in Virginia. And the partnership I was able to do is her grandmother passed away from Alzheimer's. So
Mhm.
Alzheimer's is a very big cause that she's, very invested into. So I was able to actually kind of partner with a nonprofit, HFC, Hilarity for Charity, and they were able to be a name sponsor for the event and also kind of educate the athletes on the importance of, you know, Alzheimer's awareness and kind of how that was very connected as far as like most people don't know leg strength and leg health is important for the brain, but it's also
Mm.
important for softball, right? So there are
Right.
certain drills that you do just in softball to kind of get better as a pitcher, which it was a pitching camp, that also kind of help with brain awareness and Alzheimer's awareness, just kind of strengthening your overall, mental. So that was kind
Mhm.
of special, just kind of being able to put that together for her. I would say the second one would be, and I actually have like a little deal board over here where I just kind of look. Um, there's a brand called Velo Sports that I was also able to kind of get one of my other softball athletes named Kendra Falby.
Mhm.
And basically, they were bringing out a new product for both softball and baseball players. And this was their first ever softball player, period, on college
Oh,
or pro
wow.
level. So just kind of being able to connect her through that. They were able to sponsor her gear, obviously the equipment, but it's
Mhm.
like a multi-year deal. And they're still, you know, interested in doing more if Kendra is interested in doing more. So that's kind of one of the second special ones I'd probably say.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's always a plus when, the brand wants to do more and then the athlete's on board. And I think kind of maybe jumps into a little bit to my next part about, kind of curating deals and building the authenticity is kind of what's some of the important factors that drive those brand deals, relationship, authenticity, things like that, or that you can talk to the listeners and viewers about and how they can build, those relationships.
Well, I feel like you honestly kind of hit it on the head just asking about the overall topic, right?
Hmm.
Having that relationship and being authentic in the relationship, right? Now, obviously, how you do that is a lot of different ways, but
Hmm.
I would say one of the best ways is, for one, making sure that the brand like that you're trying to partner with your athlete aligns with your athlete's core values in
Yeah.
general and what the athlete's trying to do, because that's where the best relationships kind of start from. Um, just because now you are both in building your brand together, right? Because when you're partnering with a brand, that's essentially what you're doing.
Yep.
So, like when you're building your brand together, if you have those core values, it's more authentic in the brand that's being built. It's more authentic in the work that's being done, whether that is an in-person event, obviously content being made, whether they're being an ambassador, whatever the case is. I would say the second thing would be understanding that you can't do it alone,
Yeah.
right? So, like, you have to trust either the people who are helping or assisting you or the tools that you have in place. But you also have to make sure that you're trusting your own self in doing the work and the research because that's also what's going to help. Like if you're going to build a meaningful partnership, you need to know if this brand is even interested in this type of athlete or demographic that you have. So
Yeah.
I feel like that's another component of it.
Right. And I feel like that, goes both ways, obviously for the business too. You can kind of tell like if they're just trying to, send out product and they just want to kind of flood the market, or if they're actually, looking
Hmm.
to kind of build, with your athletes or clients or rosters, right? It kind of goes two ways.
Exactly.
And then Really, I want to kind of, talk a little bit about Apex itself as far as building, building the business, kind of what that looks like for, maybe others who are interested in like the marketing space or maybe just building a business in of itself. It doesn't really have to be in this sector, but what are some, I guess, challenges that you faced, kind of, scaling this business and, building it out?
Honestly, I would say the biggest challenge is getting your own systems in order, right?
Mm,
Having the SOPs, right? The standard operating procedures, having those frameworks, having the like, if you can't document it and track it, you can't grow and scale it, right?
mm,
So being able to know every single thing that you need to do in your business, like you know it obviously in your mind, right? When you're building your business, you know how it is. But if you're wanting to train this or teach this to someone else who's looking to be a part of your organization or help your organization or even understand it, you
mhm.
have to have your own processes, right? So just building those processes and then also like having the pathway to make sure that it's done in an executed way is probably the largest challenge that I'm still facing, right? Because it's always something that if you're growing, you're also doing something new each time. But then outside of that, I would say the other challenge is being consistent in the relationship building, right? Because when you're building relationships, not every relationship's going to be the same. So like you have to approach each relationship differently on how you build it. You can't use the same form of warm welcome on someone that you can somebody else because maybe you all don't relate in every single way that might make them feel as warm as the next person, right? Some
Right.
people are more business oriented, some people are more relaxed, some people are more straightforward, some people they talk for 20 minutes just to say one thing, right? But
Yeah.
like understanding each one of those people and being consistent in the communication that works best for them is probably the second most difficult thing I'm always working through.
Right. And I feel like that goes a little bit into kind of, some of the interpersonal skills that people build, right? And especially like business owners, or I guess just really anyone, right? Kind of the being able to communicate, be able to kind of digest information, and those things all go kind of in hand as you're building a business. And you also have your own podcast and whatnot. So what does that look like? I know you're kind of in the content media podcast game a little bit. So what's that been like, and what's it like, kind of having that and working out on your side of things?
Yeah, so I started Athletes Wisdom Podcast was not initially named that, right? It was called Sports Talk with Turner just because, like, if you see right
Oh,
there, right, that's
yep,
my
right in
old
the
sign,
background.
but
Yeah,
I like red and it still just kind of adds a nice layer. But
yeah.
and it still reminds me of like where I came from, like where it all started.
Hmm.
But like it started off as just like I said, Sports Talk with Turner to just do like regular sports reviews, how like you see on like TV, like Stephen A and stuff like that,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
Then once I got into the entrepreneurship world and was able to connect that with the marketing, it turned into Athletes Wisdom Podcast to educate athletes on how to properly build a brand, right? Excuse me, and not just the brand that a lot of people think when you talk about social media. Like
Hmm.
I'm talking about your brand in the community, right? Your
Hmm.
brand for one, which initially starts just in your home and who you are as a person, right? But in your home and your community on social media, like a brand is more not more so of what you portray to the world, it's who you are and showing that to the world. So understanding how to build that brand, how to understand how to for one, also get the opportunities to, if you don't have outside help, how can you utilize that brand to gain partnerships? How can, like, basically, a lot of the things that we do at Apex as the agency is just me teaching that to anyone who is interested in doing that themselves if they don't have those resources, right? So, still brand partnerships, still how to start a business, how to be financially literate, right?
Hmm.
Because, like I was speaking of earlier, as far as my CMO position at the Fairpreneurs, my family business, the business is still a financial literacy and asset protection based business, right? So when I say asset protection, obviously people talk about how to make money, and there are still people who are learning that skill and we teach them that skill, but the larger aspect is how to keep your money and grow your money, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people at this point can make money, but they can't keep money. So how do you instill that into whether that's say trust or whether that's say certain life insurance policies or whether that's say having LLCs and S corps and C corps properly organized and knowing the hierarchy of how they should work and how they should work all into one based on your needs. And then now instead of, you're still going to have to pay taxes regardless, right? Uncle
Right.
Sam is going to come get his
He wants
cut.
that
But if
money.
you can,
Yeah.
but if you can legally reduce taxes and be able to, instead of just splurging money on nothing sometimes, right? Instead of in a year you waste 20, $30,000. So if you're able to put that into something investment related and it's able to just accrue you value over time, how do you set that up for yourself? So that's kind of like a lot of where the segue came in from why I do what I do, because it started off from the family business and learning it myself and then implementing it and helping families do that. And then I'm like, okay, I want to help athletes do this now, which came Apex.
Right.
And then I was like, how can I still tell people this message if I'm not always having the single capacity to help all of these people? So that's kind of where the podcast came into play and just sharing how it all plays a part, the brand, the assets you make, the assets you protect, and how you're growing it. And yeah, that's kind of why Athletes Wisdom Podcast came into play because that's essentially what it is.
Yeah, no, perfect. Love it. And I feel like I was kind of growing the brand and especially on the media side, the marketing side, as you know, as a CMO, it's kind of, I feel like it's always helpful to kind of have the eyes on version of, content and, always building that
Hmm.
out and, social media will take its course. And just touching on the CMO part, kind of as your, another hat you wear, are there certain things, as you said, kind of standard operating procedures or whatnot that you have kind of day to day that, you keep in place to you got a lot of things going, so I'm sure you're going a million
Hmm.
miles an hour. But as far as scheduling, just as side note, the reason I ask is I have a lot of like the viewers and listeners are, in like the 19 to 24 range, like just kind of, either graduating college, trying to figure out their schedules as far as their work and things
Hmm.
like that. And so listening to people like yourself where you're wearing a lot of hats, kind of how you, segment your day, segment your time. They're always interested in hearing things like that.
So it's a two-part basis. I make sure that there are certain days that I just do certain overall tasks,
Mm,
right? So sometimes instead of trying to split one large task up into multiple days, sometimes I just take that one task and do it all in one day instead,
gotcha.
right? So an example could be instead of a lot of people are trying to always like create content and make content in the same day.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's just easier to take one day to plan your content out, do all the content that you intend on doing, plan it out, script it out in the best way that's for you, and then take a separate day to actually film that content, right? So let's just say overall week, most of my meetings are on Mondays and Wednesdays because instead of trying to have meetings all on this like all every day, which I'll
Right.
still have meetings more than one. My team meetings are usually on like Mondays and Wednesdays and
I
most of
see.
like the super busy meetings, right? But like I'll use the other days for other partnership based meetings or follow up meetings where I'm still building those relationships and kind of growing the conversation, right? So
Mhm.
Mondays and Wednesdays to start the day, I have the team meetings. Um, Monday, usually plan for content, like plan the content out. Tuesday, film the content. And I usually just use a day for filming content because that can be a lot sometimes.
Right.
Do whatever small follow up on Tuesdays. Wednesdays, after the meetings, follow up with more brands, reach out to new brands. But all throughout this entire process, I'm still managing a team, right? So
Yeah.
I'm adding tasks for them. I'm making sure that they're hitting the KPIs. Like I'm still kind of checking my day-to-day overall admin tasks
Mhm.
while still doing the work myself. And then I would say even before all that, I check my emails probably the first day, but I think everybody kind of does that at
Yeah.
this
That's
point.
just, yeah.
So yeah, just check the emails, kind of make sure that's good. But that's part of why I have like a lot of automations in place so I can do more of like managing rather than overall like always doing busy work, right? Like
Mhm.
focusing on the tasks that actually can bring in the income and the partnerships and the
Right.
relationships rather than, uh, all right, let me go ahead and post this content every day or make this content every day or have busy meetings every single day rather than proactive meetings and kind
Mhm.
of doing what I call stop doing minimum wage activities and do income producing activities.
I like it. Awesome. Yeah, no, it's well said. And I think that the listeners' views are gonna, love that and kind of make sure to implement that in their lives or I guess careers, you could say even. And Alexander, we appreciate you jumping on today. And I like to kind of give the last closing segment to the guest, obviously, and where can people find Apex Athlete Management and whatnot, Athletes Wisdom Podcast, of course, and any of the other ventures? Where can they follow along?
Yeah, so if you want to see where we are, you can follow the company page at Apex Athlete M as in Mary, G as in goat, N as in November, T as in Tom. So Apex Athlete MGNT. You can pretty much find that in all socials. If you want to follow me personally, you can follow me at alex.n as in November dot Turner. So alex.n.turner. And if there's any last note that I would want you all to kind of take from all the things I've said today, I would probably say that when it comes to NIL, it first starts with who do you want to portray yourself as to everyone else, right? Because that is the brand you're going to build, and those are the brands you're essentially going to attract as far as how they operate, the core values that they have, even sometimes the products or services that they have, right? So focus on building the brand first, because then when you start your outreach or have somebody start outreach for you, right? It's much easier to then naturally build those relationships and connect rather than trying to, you know, uh, do the cheap or easy way around and then you
Mhm.
don't see it working for you.
Right. Yeah, no, well said. And thanks for kind of closing that out and leaving the listeners and viewers with that great advice. And thanks, like I said, Alexander, thanks for joining us today. And looking forward to following you and your team's success as you continue to evolve in the NIL space. And thanks to our listeners and viewers that have tuned on in today. And you can find this episode, where you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and we'll see you guys next week.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.